And welcome to a very special episode of
the Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are two real life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And have we got a doozy for you today, folks?
Yeah, we did. You know, Ryan, I'm so excited for this episode. One, because I didn't get to go to Dbt Coalesce, so I want to hear all about it. And two, you did go to Dbt Coalesce, so I do get to hear all about it.
I know. It's amazing how that worked out.
I know.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on a very special Monday edition. Of course, we did not go live last Thursday because I was traveling back from the conference, and going live would have been impossible. But we're bringing you this special Monday show to help make up for it. And so let's not waste any time, and let's just jump into it, huh?
Yep.
What happened at Dbt Coalesce? Okay, we're going to go through what the conference was like. We'll talk about Dbt in general, and we'll talk about the major announcements that Dbt made at the show, and we'll get into it there. But before we do, a couple points of order. First of all, meet the Super Data Brothers. Well, your opportunity to meet me at Coalesce has passed, but you can still meet us January 27th at Data Day Texas. We love Data Day Texas, don't we, Eric?
We do.
Yeah, because it is a no BS one-day practitioner-focused data conference that vendors attend, but they don't bring all their sales crap to.
They don't run the show.
No,
basically.
It's an awesome conference. If you follow, there's a good chance if you follow the Joe Reese cinematic universe on LinkedIn that your favorite data influencers will be there, and so including Joe and Matt, and so. Highly recommend you attend. Of course, if you use the code Super Data Brothers when you register, you will save 20% on your registration. And we hope to see you there. This is just an awesome conference. Yeah. And it's honestly my favorite one.
It's the first thing we did as a Super Data Brothers before we even started the show. So
that's correct. Yeah, we made the shirts first, and then we started the show second.
It's true. Order of priorities.
And then some event in Detroit, TBD fall. We're still working this out, so I would expect sometime in November we're going to do some sort of kind of low key data meetup Detroit to try to get things rolling in the data community around here. We're a big city. We don't have any data events. It's time to rectify that. So if you live in the area, I look forward to seeing you there. Or if you don't live in the area and you want to fly in for a happy hour. Okay. And before we go any further, we cannot continue without discussing our good friends at Digital Hive and the sponsor for today's show. So Digital Hive is an analytics catalog. What is an analytics catalog, you ask? Well, it's a little different from a data catalog. A data catalog, of course, keeps track of your columns and tables and the files you have in S3 and all that sort of stuff. An analytics catalog keeps track of your user-facing analytics content and makes it easy to find. But in the case of Digital Hive, it goes way beyond just cataloging your assets. It gives you a single place where you can take a chart from Power BI, a chart from Qlik, and a chart from Tableau and assemble them into a single dashboard, okay? And then put some filters on top of it that filter the content from all three places. So it's more than just a place to find the charts you already built. It's also a place to squeeze all the juice out of every dashboard you have to take the most impactful, most important pieces and get them into a single view for end users so that they don't have to go digging through 2 or 3 BI tools to find what they need. They have a simple place to go find what they need and to create content that unites analytics from across different BI tools into one place. And if you work at a large company, you know that this is a real problem, right? And it's something, over the course of our career, especially when we were consulting, Eric, like every client we went to had 3 or 4. I one time participated in a BI rationalization project where I think we identified 21 BI tools that existed at that client. And the reality is you're not going to go from 21 BI tools to one BI tool. So you need something like an analytics catalog and the best analytics catalog, Digital Hive, in order to bring all that stuff together for your end users. So a big shout out to our friends at Digital Hive for sponsoring the show. And thank you once again. Mike Norris, good to see you in the chat. Of course, Digital Hive has a conference coming up this weekend, folks, the Jazz Up Your Analytics Conference, October 30th through November 1st. This is focused on BI and analytics leaders, covering topics like DevOps for analytics, near and dear to my heart. As you know, I'm a big proponent of taking a DevOps approach to the way you do analytics in BI. If you're not doing that today, I think you're not doing it right? So use the code here. Check out the conference at modio.com/jazzupyouranalytics. I'm sure it's going to be a really valuable event, so check it out. Okay, so what happened at Dbt Coalesce?
Yeah.
And Mike Norris, hello from Ottawa. Excited to hear all the news.
Yeah, if anyone else is tuning in from anywhere, just pop a hello where you're tuning in from, and we'll give you a shout out too.
We will give you a shout out in the chat. Okay, so I think we need to talk for a second about what is Dbt, because what I have found is that there's a, in our audience tends to be 2 groups of people. It is data engineers at kind of SaaS startups and in the data startup world, and then also enterprise business intelligence and analytics people. It's a really fun audience to have. But what it means is that half of our audience maybe has never heard of Dbt and the other half uses it every day. So Dbt, I think the easiest way to understand it is Dbt is to 2023 what Informatica was to 2003. Okay. It's a data transformation tool. It puts the T in your ELT. What it really does is it takes data, kind of the ELT way of doing things. You extract data from your source systems. You land it largely as is in a system like Snowflake or in a lakehouse structure, and then you transform it there, right? So you're not transforming in flight like we would have with Informatica when I started my career in 2010 or so, right? That's how we did things. We extracted it, transformed it in flight, and then loaded it into the Oracle data warehouse we had at the time in its analytics-ready format. That's not what we're doing here. We're moving the data largely as is and then transforming it once it gets into the warehouse, right? So that's what Dbt does. And the way it does it is it takes this software engineering, SQL-based, code-first approach to the transformation. So it's really taking, we talk about the Jazz Up Your Analytics conference and the DevOps approach to doing data tasks. Dbt does this. Dbt is kind of code first, CI/CD, right? Version control. Yeah. You're building and deploying your analytics pipelines using code. It's totally different from kind of a GUI-based tool that you might use to do a similar thing, like say Alteryx. Dbt does it all with code. One of the fun things about Dbt is it comes out of a consulting company called Fishtown Analytics. So they just built this because it helped them with their with their analytics consulting tasks. And then
normally those tools don't pan out.
I know, right? Usually they don't. Yeah. It is very true that when you're in data consulting, there are things that seem like obvious software tools to you that actually aren't that useful. And we've learned that in the past, right?
Yes.
But this one turned out to be useful. And it's just it's a different, I think it partially explains what makes Dbt different. What makes their community different is that this was not a bunch of, this was not like a VC driven, we set out to start a software company story. This was, we had an analytics firm. We built some internal tooling that helped us deliver projects. And it turned out that was the most useful thing that we had, that it was like transcended our use for it and really has turned into, in a lot of ways, an industry standard for data transformation. And so This is also, for those of you at the enterprise tier, when you hear the term modern data stack thrown around, this is probably a central tool in the modern data stack.
Yeah.
You could argue that it's actually Snowflake that is the central tool in the modern data stack, but I would say, when it comes to the ecosystem of tools that make up the modern data stack, I would say DBT is kind of at the core of it, right? And then everything is an offshoot, not an offshoot of DBT, but is part of the DBT world.
So is DBT like a cloud only solution? Like, isn't Snowflake cloud only?
No. So I mean,
can I put it on my Oracle data warehouse?
Yes, you can point it to many databases. I don't know the list of them off the top of my head, but the important thing about it is it's an open source. They have what they call DBT Core, which is like the open source project, and then they have DBT Cloud, which is that's their go-to market strategy, right? Is an open source core product and then a premium cloud product on top of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what DBT is. What is Coalesce like? It's nothing but vibes, baby. It's a different kind of conference. I would, if you're kind of an old, you've been in this industry for a while, this is not going to be anything like, an IBM or a Microsoft or Amazon conference, right?
You mean didn't have Imagine Dragons play at the end?
No, they didn't have we did see that at an IBM conference in like 2017. No, it's a younger crowd. It's a much more diverse crowd. It's just totally different. And I think a lot of that is because of DBT's heritage in the startup community and how that's who first embraced DBT. Is it's kind of kept that ethos as the tooling has grown, as the number of users has grown, and as it's kind of gone, as larger companies embrace it. So it's a really refreshing conference to attend. I will tell you, I'm 40. I'm like an old guy at this conference, as opposed to many other industry conferences. I'm now like median age, right?
Yeah.
But here, 40 makes me an old guy, and I embrace my oldness, by the way. While I was there, I won't go through the list, but we did a ton of awesome interviews at the Good Data booth. I was there with Good Data, of course, as you all know. I'm the vice president of product strategy at Good Data, and so we sponsored the conference. Had a great time. It was awesome. But I interviewed all of these very interesting people. Some of these interviews are already live on LinkedIn or YouTube, so check them out there. Others will be going live over the course of the week, and so I encourage you to look at them as they launch. Really great conversations I had with everyone here. So I will tell you, the first big question coming out of the conference was like, is DBT going enterprise? And I would just answer this by saying yes. Like they are. And for the DBT community, I think this is scary. Like there's a big worry because it's a real community-based tool. Like that is what has powered its growth, is the community and the vibes. And yes, it's very useful, but it's also, it has that je ne sais quoi that tools get sometimes, where they just, they grow on their own. Because like Tableau, I would say DBT is the Tableau of the late 20 teens and early, probably will be the Tableau of the 2020s, in that it is powered by its community and people really love it, right? Just like Tableau was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And so there's this worry about going enterprise. Like, what does that mean for us if DBT starts focusing on,
like they're about to be purchased by Salesforce or something?
I mean, let's hope not. I don't know if anybody's worried about that yet, although you'd assume at some point there's either they go public or, there's an acquisition exit. Yeah. There wasn't really any conversations about that, but it was just, and you'll see when we talk through the features that they announced, that a lot of the features are aimed at addressing like problems that come with scale and complexity, and who has those problems, right? It's big companies predominantly. And so, like there's just a worry of like, okay, as we get the enterprise firms coming in, and as the, bigger and bigger companies are deploying DBT, and bigger companies want to partner with DBT, like DBT's partner ecosystem right now is very focused on other startups, but that's going to change over time. You're going to see bigger, older, more enterprise firms integrating with DBT. Like, what is that going to do to our community and our vibe? And that's a legit concern, but I think, this is inevitable. DBT needs to make money. They need to justify a very high valuation. And the way you do that is you sell big contracts to big customers, right? But that was kind of an interesting question. So, I made updates to this deck and it didn't update, and it's irritating me. Anyway, so there were 4 major announcements that I'll cover here. There's what we call DBT Explorer, the DBT Mesh, the Cloud CLI, and the semantic layer. And we have a comment from Lindsay. So Lindsay, former Super Data Show guest, arguably teams using DBT for a while also have complexity challenges, although I'm sure there's correlation with companies growing over the same period. Right, exactly. And Lindsay, that's what I would say to someone who was worried about all this. All DBT cares about is enterprise, because the features seemed associated with scale, is even small companies who have, it's exactly what she's I don't need to repeat it. You're 100% right. And so, it's not just enterprise companies. And I'm curious if anybody brought that up to you. I had a few people bring that up to me, proactively, oh, do you think DBT is going enterprise, as something they wanted to talk to me about while I was there. And so I don't know if you heard it or not. Also, I would say Lindsay, by the way, had the best booth. They had a puppy playpen at their booth. It's totally unfair, Lindsay, to bring a puppy playpen to the rest of us vendors, because who wants to come talk to me when they can hang out with puppies? So A+ marketing there. You guys killed it. So we'll talk through these kind of what these tools are and kind of my take on them. I will caveat this by, I'm not a DBT expert. When we talk about BI and analytics and data visualization and structuring, user-facing data teams, that's where my expertise really lies when it comes to DBT. I rely on my conversations with people like Lindsay in order to in order to understand what's happening in the ecosystem, because I'm not a deeply skilled hands-on DBT practitioner. And so, I'm curious, Lindsay, if you stay tuned in through this, what your feedback is on this sort of stuff, for sure. And maybe we can have you on the show to talk about it. Actually, that might be an interesting, you can be one of our repeat guests. Okay. So DBT Explorer, I pulled some screenshots off of DBT's website, so you could see how they're marketing these things now that they've announced them. But what this really does, I think, is it helps you visualize, so when you're working in DBT, you create projects, right? And this helps you visualize your projects and understand lineage for all the assets that you have in DBT. Because to Lindsay's point, it can get really gnarly even for small teams, and for enterprise teams, everything's gnarly. It doesn't matter what tool you're using. And so this is really geared at giving you kind of a visual way to see and explore your DBT environment, your DBT projects, and all that kind of stuff. Here's a screenshot of it that I pulled from the announcement. I
updated the slide deck, by the way.
Yeah, I saw it flash. So
with a new one. So if you want to, it should be your latest revision. So
okay. Well, remind me at the end of the show to go back to our. There's a slide about our special live stream tomorrow that I wanted to make sure that we promo here. So here you can see an example of DBT Explorer, where it's got kind of the assets. It's basically like a lineage tool in a catalog is the easiest way to put it. So, what is it and why should you care? It's a model and metric catalog plus a lineage tool. One of the main things that DBT is talking about here that I think is super useful is the ability to actually explore and find what you have and then reuse it. One of the advantages of this kind of, the analytics as code approach is the reusability of code versus UI-based objects, because code is easy to reuse compared to reusability needs to be deeply integrated into a UI. And most data tools that are UI bound are not good at this. They just weren't designed for reusability in mind. They were designed for other things like ease of end user, or developer features or that sort of thing, but not kind of this software engineering approach. And so that I think is the biggest tip from what, my experience being involved in data teams is the biggest advantage of this. It's just the ability to figure out what you have and then reuse it, right? And the multi-project lineage was another piece of it, like so that you can see where things are used across projects or trace lineage across projects. Meaning, if you're going to have a cross-project reference for something, that you can like actually make it easy to visualize that. When Lindsay mentioned things can get gnarly, this is the gnarliness, Eric, is like, we've built all these pipelines and we've copied code from pipeline A to pipeline B to pipeline C. And now we don't understand the dependencies that exist anymore.
Yeah.
In our environment.
Here's this view. What's feeding the view? I don't know. It was made 10 years ago.
I mean, yeah, like, DBT customers aren't quite at the 10-year mark, but they'll be there eventually.
Yeah.
And these are the types of things like, that people look at sometimes when they look at these new tools. And you'll see a lot of this when we talk about the semantic layer. Like if you've been at this for a long time, you might look at this and say, like, how is it possible that this cutting edge tool is just now adding this kind of lineage feature? And the thing about it is, like, the problem that it solved, it solved such a critical problem that the fact that it didn't have great lineage, that it didn't have like multi-project lineage, or that it was sometimes hard to understand your deployment was overlookable, because it allowed you to like build pipelines and like scale your data transformations so much more quickly than tools that people had used in the past, right? I think that tells you how much better it is than a lot of legacy tools in this space, and how much better the code-based approach is than the UI-based approach. The fact that this was able to grow so quickly without a great lineage tool, for example. So then the next thing we talked about was DBT Mesh. This is a very interesting idea. The idea of DBT Mesh. It's clear the popularity of, first of all, the word mesh driven by data mesh is the first thing I'll note here. Like, just mesh is mesh and fabric. And of course, they're almost the same word, are going to be slapped on every damn product for the next couple of years. So that's one thing I learned at the DBT
Microsoft
conference.
Fabric. Maybe we'll get Microsoft Mesh. Isn't Microsoft Fabric just like, hey, here's all the tools we have?
Basically, yeah. Yes, basically
we're calling it Fabric now.
Yeah, and and actually one of the things DBT announced that I don't have in this slide deck is integration with Fabric. So the DBT Mesh will now integrate with the Microsoft Fabric to cover all of your clothing needs.
Yeah.
So the idea behind this is really like, and I applaud DBT for doing this in a lot of ways, is to embrace kind of the emerging like domain and data product based way of thinking about building data programs. Mm-hmm. And when I say program, I don't mean like application. I mean like a program, data practice. Let's say that instead, data practice. That was really, I think, largely kicked off by Zhamak's data mesh concept and the book coming out a couple of years ago. So to really embrace that, like the domain-driven decentralization, where each business area is owning its own data assets, data products. However, there's a centrally managed and deployed platform that those assets are contained within and products are built upon, right? And so this is DBT's take on that. And here you can see an example that they provided of kind of how this works, right? So you can have a foundational project, a very large project, and then off of that project, you create, a smaller project for marketing, for finance, and for sales that contains the assets of those different domains, right? So then finance is now managing kind of the finance model, but there's still a connection to the other models, right? So you kind of get inheritance between the models, and thus between the domains, and you have kind of a common security, common definitions of everything, right? So the foundational data team shifts from being the people who build everything to being kind of the orchestrators and managers and maintainers of the platform. And of course, they still do building, right? Because they have the skills to solve the toughest problems. But this is kind of the way, and this is me projecting what I know about data mesh onto this a little bit, but I think it is like DBT's intent is to move to give you kind of domain and data product oriented, pipeline building and transformation capabilities on the DBT platform. And the way they're going to do that is through this DBT mesh. And it's just in line with what everybody's doing. Like everything right now is about movement to federation and decentralization of structures, like centralized and provisioned platforms, centralized rules and governance, but decentralized domain and data product driven ownership, I think is the important term, ownership. Not just that marketing has the ability to do some self-service, but that they actually own the marketing pipelines and the marketing data products, right? Now, how will this actually play out in terms of team structures and like, is the idea that marketing is going to hire their own small data team, right?
That's a concern of, I'd say, like, I could see coming from a lot of big organizations with the mesh concept. It's like the central data teams, like, don't trust their HR to handle Excel sheets. Why are they going to trust them to handle, a verified data product with API hook-ins or whatever your solution uses? Like,
right.
For a lot of organizations that are less like agile and less likely to adapt, I see it being almost a hard sell.
Yeah.
That kind of feature.
And we've seen that with data mesh, I think, like the wide variety of responses to it. Is everybody embracing data mesh or data fabric? Like, no. Lots of organizations recognize that that this sort of structure is beyond what they're able to do culturally. And I think, and DBT acknowledges, if you go to the blog post and read about this, like that this is as much, it's not just a technical change that they're making to DBT to enable this, although they are making some changes to the software to enable it. But it's also just the word Zhamak uses in her book is socio-technical, right? Data mesh is a socio-technical solution to problems. And like the socio comes first for a reason, and that's because there's a lot of organizational stuff that you need to, if you're going to embrace this model, you actually do need to have a data product owner in marketing. And that data product owner does need to have a team that's capable of producing data products. And that means you do need someone who can build a data pipeline and who can maintain this sort of thing.
Plus, I could see resistance from central IT teams. It's like, okay, so you're going to half my number of resources and they're just going to live in other departments now?
Yeah, and I mean, this is the classical central IT teams are always resistant to this.
Very defensive of that kind of stuff, of losing control over things.
Yep, yeah. And so as DBT in general gets embraced by larger and larger companies, and I can tell you it for sure is, like when I look at, we had lots of conversations as Good Data, so we scanned badges and the names of there were some really big companies who we talked to about their kind of data platform and BI tool needs at the conference. And so that tells me, and they are using DBT. And what they're going to find is that as you move into larger and larger companies, that these ideas, like the central IT team, the territorial nature of many central IT teams, and the fact that they don't want to work with the domains, right? Once they learn that, say, marketing has bought their own BI tool and has bought their own data platform and is doing their own, it almost becomes a rivalry.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's life at the enterprise scale.
I guess this is what you have to consider is that if you don't allow it to happen under your purview, it'll happen outside of your purview.
Yes.
Right. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've been telling IT teams for years. Is like, look, the business is going to find a way to solve these problems. It can either be with you or against you, and so you need to make it with you ultimately, because you'll lose. At the end of the day, you'll lose.
Yeah.
I think there was a time, like when I talked to those who came before me, where like IT
the wise elders.
Yes. Where IT could say like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And we control the tech. You don't control the tech. And
that's
we
not
choose
really true.
That's
even
not
at
true
large
anymore.
Organizations.
No,
that's not true anymore.
It is 100% not. And so, So what the heck is this and why should you care? Well, I already said a lot of this stuff. The domain and data product oriented approach from data mesh applied to DBT. This is an idea I've been saying a lot lately. Zhamak's ideas will conquer the world. The idea of data products, decentralized domain development, like this sort of stuff is taking off, even in places that don't embrace data mesh and have no intention of actually implementing the full data mesh concept. There's still data products in particular, I think, are just applying product thinking to your data is I think the easiest thing people can do. Like they read Zhamak's book and they say like, oh gosh, we can't do all this stuff. But this piece we can do, this data product piece. And so this is just more evidence of that. Like if you haven't read this book, read it. Even if you never, ever work at a place that implements data mesh, you are going to be running into these ideas over the course of the next decade of your career. I guarantee it. Okay. So that's one thing. The big thing here is like the cross project reference. So like you can have project A and project B, and project A can reference things in project B and vice versa. And that kind of gives you like the centrally maintained, the ability to have kind of the centrally maintained platform where each domain is building its own project and those projects can cross-reference one another. So like finance doesn't need to rebuild the logic from marketing. They can just point to marketing's logic and use it in their own model, right? That's really what this boils down to from a technical perspective, I think, on DBT is the ability to do that. It's interesting to see like this and DBT Explorer clearly are designed to work together. You need something like DBT Explorer where you have cross-project lineage and where you can easily find assets, products, metrics, whatever you want to call them, and reuse them. Like you need that in order to enable the DBT mesh. Okay. And so that was, it was very interesting to see like, and this is where the idea of like, oh, are they going enterprise? I think comes into play because this to many people, especially those who are still who don't have the gnarly problems that Lindsay mentioned yet and are at smaller firms, these seem like, oh, these are just features for big companies. I don't think that's true at all. But that there was a little bit of that perception that I saw at the conference, and I can understand why, right? Because at first glance, like, oh, this mesh thing, this is just for big firms. I think this is a design pattern you're going to want to use. Even if you're building all this stuff, you're still going to want to use a lot of these design patterns. The DBT Cloud CLI, this is an area where like I don't have as deep expertise in this at all to talk about it, right? I think the big takeaway from this is just like a lot of these features existed for the core open source product, and now you can use them for cloud, right? That was I think the big takeaway here. So like it's the CLI for cloud. You can use it with any IDE, like VS Code, for example. One interesting thing that I think people will like is this idea of you can point to prod models instead of building all your upstream dev models. This just saves a lot of time because I think what you had to do in the past is like you had to build a ton of upstream models. You had to and that costs money. If you're running DBT Cloud, for example, you had to build all these models before you could start working on the actual piece of it where you want to do your dev. And now you can just kind of point to the prod models and do your dev point, like referencing them instead of referencing the dev models, which will save people a lot of time and effort. But again, the CLI, like not, I don't have tons of hands-on experience, so I can't provide great insight into what this is going to do.
Just a better, easier for devs, better programmatic way to access it.
Exactly. And using the tooling of your choice, I think, is a big part of it. Like,
because I imagine I haven't used DBT Cloud, but I imagine it was probably all through like a web interface. So they had to just connect it directly to your IDE, like you would be if you were using the open source version that you spun up yourself. I imagine that's kind of bridging that gap between those two. Yeah. So that's something users will like. Yep,
absolutely. And then the semantic layer. Oh, baby. We love semantic layers here at...
Gosh, I just really want like a semantic layer to win, right? so that I can implement it and know like, okay, this is what we're using, and it's not going away, right? Because right now
Right.
there's lots of options bubbling up for like what's
Mhm.
like for what's going to be the independent semantic layer you can use to connect to all your BI tools. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm at large organizations. I can't pick one right now. I can't make the push to pick one right now because there are so many. It's like, which one's going to win? So hearing about this has me very interested.
Right. Because to your point, like you know, a lot of people in the DBT community, and if you look at like the go-to-market strategy for a lot of these tools, you know, they have an open source project and they are in the business of like a dev will go out or a team of devs will go out and try something.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. That's okay because they just try the open source version. And then, you know, if it doesn't work, they try a different one, right? Oh, we used to use Cube and that didn't work. So then we tried at scale, right? But at an organization like Michigan State, like that's not how things work.
Big monolithic. It's more than 100 years old,
Right. And,
like, that's not how things work. We need basically like someone to make a pitch to us, right? And convince people above myself and people above myself that yes, this is the path going forward. And then 5 years later, we'll implement it.
Right. And you can't just kick the tires on it. You can't just install one of these open source semantic layers and just try it out to see how it works. Like that's not an option. There's a lot you need to do. So
yeah, in order to implement a new technology, there's a lot like that needs to change process wise.
Right.
Right.
And so, you know, the DBT semantic layer, this phrase single source of truth, it is so funny to me to see this coming back into
hearing this
vogue.
for the first time.
I know.
Like, single source of truth. That sounds nice.
But this is a real problem in that, like, you know, if you've been using DBT for a significant amount of time, there's a good choice that you have, you know, it's powerful and you're able to build and maintain complex pipelines and all this other sort of stuff. There's a good chance that what you've done is you've created a bit of a mess. And now you have a problem of, okay, where do I go to get revenue information when it's in 27 tables, right? And like none of them were designed to be the canonical definition of revenue.
Yeah.
And so that's
even if you do have a canonical definition of revenue, you're recreating stuff all the time.
And so that's kind of where the semantic layer comes in, is of course it's this abstraction between the physical data as stored in your database and the downstream uses of it. And this is not a new idea. Single source of truth is not a new idea. Semantic layers have existed for a long time. The previous generation of BI tools, I guess it's 2 generations ago now, like Business Objects and Cognos, and you know, Click is kind of straddles generations, but it comes out of that era. This is part of what they did. This was part of the definition of BI, as you built one of these, and then we got out of doing that. And of course, now it's coming back. So what is this and why should you care? It does all the things I just described. This is also a key part of the DBT mesh. So like the DBT mesh is not a single technology. It's kind of it's almost like an emergent thing from the features that are being added to DBT and the changes that they recommend you make to how you structure your projects and teams. This is the semantic layer. It is a very important piece of it. And the way it works in reality is that you've got, instead of directly accessing the tables that you've built using DBT, say you've got a bunch of tables in Snowflake, people go through the semantic layer. They see an abstraction of those tables. They see the metrics and attributes from those tables in the semantic layer, and then they can access it via SQL. They can integrate it with certain BI tools. Like we have an integration now. We have a semantic layer in Good Data. We have a DBT integration where if you do something in the DBT semantic layer, we will automatically import and build it in the Good Data semantic layer so that they stay in sync, right?
Yeah. Now, is that something that I don't know if they talked about this or not, like that each like BI vendor will have to build a connector, or is there like a generic view that you could use a tool that just connects to SQL databases and point it to this metric layer and be able to use it?
I think
or do you need a specific one?
There's a little column A and a little column B, I think, right? Is the way it works is that I don't know. So this is what I'll say. I don't know 100% with DBT. So we're talking general about semantic layers.
Yeah.
And I know like ours and at scales, and I would imagine others work this way where there's a couple options. There's a direct integration where that gives you kind of better performance and allows you to like browse this semantic layer in better ways. that tools do. DBT has a number of partners who do this. And then there's kind of the fallback is the semantic layer can just look like a database to third-party applications. So you can just send it SQL, where what you might be saying is, select star from table, but in reality, all those metrics and attributes are not in a single table. They're in 10 underlying tables. So what the semantic layer will do is it will take your select star from table, and it will interpret your SQL and then issue SQL to the data source to fetch that data no matter where it lives.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what, like, if you look at this list of things that the semantic layer does in DBT, you can see that.
Put it in old school terms, it's like it's like a view, but dynamic, so it only pulls the data that you request from the given table from the underlying different tables, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it does.
Yeah, explaining that to like an old school data warehouse person. That's how I explain it.
Yeah, and for our like Cognos centric audience, like this is Framework Manager.
Yeah,
whereas like
data modules. Yep.
But it's open Framework Manager where other tools can use it and where it has APIs that can access the data, right? That's kind of what you see here. So
do you know if the DBT semantic layer is like going to be part of like the open source core, or is this going to be like an enterprise only feature?
I think that no, I don't think it's part of core. I think it's like it's an add-on you have to buy. This is part of their monetization.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
And again, it's one of those things like, oh, this is why they're going enterprise, because they got this. First of all, the semantic layer. I've heard from people that semantic layers are something that only enterprises need. I disagree with that, but I've heard that from people. And then like this is like monetization, but DBT's got to make money, guys.
It's true.
Like everybody needs to make money. We do have a question here from CMan3712. Is DBT trying to compete with Dremio, Presto, etc.? I don't really think so, insofar as like I don't think their intention, if you look at Dremio or Presto, like what they're really trying to do is they're really about like federation and kind of like SQL or query generation. So the ability to combine like many data sources together into one. And to extract all of that away from downstream processes. So like, you have Redshift and Snowflake and some data in S3, and I want to issue a query that pulls data from all three of those. That's kind of what Dremio enables you to do, right? And the same thing with Presto. And so I don't think that's like necessarily DBT's intention. There's some overlap with that, but I think DBT is going to remain focused on the core pipeline generation, data transformation. That is what the product is good at, whereas Dremio and these other technologies, Starburst, they're more about like, don't transform the data, leave it where it is, and allow our engine to query it where it rests, and then, render the SQL results or the query results for you, right? So I don't think they're directly trying to compete with it. Now, there is some degree of like overlap, but I think, the technical things that you need to do, like DBT, I think is still going to be focused on, okay, if you've got data in all those different sources, you need to move it into one place, ideally, and you need to move it into one place and then query it there, right? Whereas the whole value prop of Dremio is like, don't do that, just leave it where it is. But I can see why you might question that, like with the semantic layer, and maybe they will go in that direction, right? Where they're going to like, but I just don't foresee that, at least in the medium term. Now, one thing, like if you're a longtime data warehouse or BI person who has experience with tools like that had this semantic layer, like Cognos or the Cognos Framework Manager or the Business Objects Universe, right? You might look at this list of features and again, you say like, what is the deal here, right?
What's new?
Like, how is any of this stuff new? And it's not that the stuff is new. It's that there's a new generation of technology underpinning all this that makes it far easier to build, deploy, and scale this sort of thing than what we had in the past. That's what's new.
And hopefully it's not, the outputs are not the vendor. It's the BI tool is not tied to the semantic layer. So like you're stuck, because back in the day it was you bought a BI tool, you got the semantic layer, and that's what your organization used. I mean, the past, I don't know, 15 years, it's shifted hardcore to an organization can support 4+ BI tools. So like, this having the semantic layer is not new. Having an independent semantic layer is new.
That's the new piece. Yes. Where it's agnostic to what lives downstream of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is new. And you have to understand that like there's this whole generation of tools. When I was saying DBT is kind of the core of the modern data stack, there's this whole generation of tooling and frankly practitioners who don't know this stuff, right? And they grew up like cloud native, modern microservices based architectures underpinning the software, right? And now they were focused on the value of that, and now that they've reached a level of maturity, they're going to add the stuff that we had in the 2000s generation of tools that were good. Like the good stuff from that generation, they're going to add. You can see this like Power BI and QuickSight. They're not really startups, but they're adding standard reporting features.
Yeah.
Right.
QuickSight's is good. Power BI is still trash.
Well, the thing
that's
about
my opinion. Just an aside thrown in there.
I mean, the thing about Microsoft is like I'm not in the business of betting against them, right?
No, they don't. They don't have to have good paginated reports.
Not on any time scale, right?
No,
I think. I mean, think about when Power BI first came out, how much it sucked.
Yeah,
and now it's
like, well, it's basically like this Franken BI tool built off of like a bunch like Excel Power or whatever. I don't even remember. I don't even know. So
Power
it's
Query.
all this, it's got all this weird like the query language is super weird. It's like it is generating SQL underneath, but you're not writing SQL. You're writing, you're writing
and what
DAX.
they've got like MDX and DAX and M or whatever they call the third line.
M.
Yes. So I think that that's what you see here, right? Is and we should just it's almost like it's a business opportunity, right? Is like think about something that BI or data transformation tools did in 2008 and then make a startup for it that does it now. C-Man says there are some monster FM models out there that people rely on, but it's all model.xml files. I bet you could write some migration script if you had to. Depends. 100% to translate like model XML files to YAML or something like that. I mean, we did that at PM Square.
I was going to say, talk about consultant tools that.
Like we did that at PM Square that was able to translate model.xml files to from Framework Manager to data module JSON files. For those of you not in the Cognos world, this is basically previous generations modeling tool to current generations modeling tool, right? They had a technology change. And so, but you're right. Like, the other person you can ask to do it is ChatGPT. And it will do a decent job.
They'll do okay-ish.
I mean, will it ultimately be faster than rebuilding a monster FM model yourself? I don't know.
I'm just saying, I don't think ChatGPT could do it. I don't think there's enough documentation in its the data that feeds it.
Sure.
On either FM models or data modules or some of the other stuff to like actually just do it.
Yeah. It definitely thinks it can do it. That's the important piece.
It'll tell you sweet lies.
And that was kind of the fourth, right? The semantic layer is the fourth thing that they announced at DBT. So when you take all this in whole, like are they going enterprise? Well, these are all going to be really useful enterprise features I don't think DBT is going to become less useful for those of you at startups or in the mid-market, right? I think, but I do think like there's, the big prize is solving big problems ultimately for big companies. And, that's the direction DBT has to eventually move in. And here's the last thing I would say. If you're kind of in that startup world and, you don't like this move, as DBT grows and gets into bigger and bigger companies, you can grow with it.
Yeah.
And like big companies, you may like if you're 27 years old or 30 years old and you're a data engineer and you like the startup grind and you get energized by that. I totally get that. Are you going to still feel that way when you're 40? Maybe not. And so like this is, in a weird way, as DBT grows and gets into bigger and bigger companies, it will be your bridge to move to those companies if you want. Where you get paid in money, not in stock options.
Yeah, actual cash.
Right. And so I actually think this is a huge opportunity. As large firms use DBT, they're going to need the people with the skills to implement and run this sort of thing. And where are those people and who are those people? Right now,
you can say, I've been doing DBT for 5 years.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's actually a huge career opportunity. Now, I there's definitely a social element of like the modern data stack scene and like not wanting to, and this is just, now I'm putting on my old guy wisdom hat, I guess, of like not want, I don't want to work for a big company. And, and like that is all true. And maybe you don't, and maybe that's not for you, but for some of you, it is for you. And you'll find that you thrive in that environment. Well, it's where you get the cheddar.
If you're not starting up a company yourself or like getting it on the ground floor, that's where the Skrilla is at.
Yeah, that's who can pay. And so really this is an opportunity more than anything for all you data engineers and analytics engineers out there to to branch out, to grow your careers, to move into larger firms, solving larger problems. And I think you should, rather than being afraid of it, the better option is to embrace it and recognize that things will change. And, the community feel that you've had will change. It's not going to go away, right? It didn't go away for Tableau. Tableau kept its amazing, passionate community as it grew into a giant company. And I think the same thing will happen with DBT, but it is going to change. But what's going to come along with that are huge opportunities for you as individuals. So that's my rah-rah speech to all you 20-something data engineers.
Yeah, especially if like you're like if you've used DBT extensively already and you're seeing these new enterprise features, like if you look into semantic layers and how to integrate it with one or two BI tools, it's like, since it's brand new, you're suddenly one of the experts, right?
Yeah.
So when it's getting implemented at a big company, you can say, "Oh yeah, I've connected the DBT semantic layer to Power BI and Tableau before."
Yeah.
And you'll be one of the few people on earth who have ever done that. And so when they need someone, you're one of the few people who can do it.
Yeah.
Right? And it won't take you that much to look into it. Right.
And this happened in the past, right? I mean, every company, like, the past doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? And so, like, if you look at the same story happened with a previous generation of tools, where, they were not Cognos. Cognos's first customer was not General Motors, but General Motors eventually became a huge Cognos customer. And the same thing will happen with DBT. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of the show here. One thing, if we go way back, it would be remiss of me not to promote tomorrow's very special live stream. So tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I am going live to discuss data visualization in gaming via the new game City Skylines 2. City Skylines 2 is a city builder. Of course, the way city builders work, they have very complex simulations, and they need to communicate to you what is going on in that simulation using data visualization. These games have tons of charts. They have geospatial overlays and analyses. They communicate what's happening in the underlying sim to you using techniques that we use in the analytics industry to communicate to our end users. So I thought it'd be fun, since I'm a total crazy like city builder. I love city builders and simulation, this style of simulation game. I thought it would be fun to kind of do a let's play where we look at the data visualization techniques employed in City Skylines 2. It comes out tomorrow, and I hope you'll join me at 3 p.m. Eastern time to check that out. Of course, I upgraded my rig for this, so I bought one of these. Because what I've heard is that the game is horribly optimized at launch, and if I don't want to be playing a slideshow, I need to bump up my GPU. I had a 1080 Ti, which wasn't going to cut it anymore. And so, yeah, join us for that tomorrow. Very exciting. I see we've got Lindsay had to drop. Great discussion and overview of super relevant topics related to DBT. Thanks, guys. I got to hop off. It was good to have you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was, I met Lindsay in person at the conference, and so that was nice. It's I met a lot of our guests in person, actually, which was cool. Okay, so join us tomorrow for Data Viz and Gaming at 3 p.m. Eastern. Probably going to stream for a couple hours. So looking forward to seeing you there. And of course, Thursday we have Monica K. Royal from Nerd Nourishment joining us to talk about navigating data career transitions and her passion for helping people figure out their passion in data. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Monica. She's pretty cool. Any last words there, Eric? I think we should probably thank our sponsors and then let the good people go. So last shout out to our sponsor, Digital Hive. Digital Hive is an analytics catalog. What is an analytics catalog, you ask? It keeps track of your user-facing analytics content, not your tables and columns and metrics. So there are many tools that do this. What makes Digital Hive special is it's just really, this is kind of an emerging category. Digital Hive is very well, has been around for a while, has lots of great features, and unlike many other analytics catalogs, it lets you combine elements from different tools into a single dashboard. So chart from Click, chart from Power BI, bring them together into a dashboard, put some cross-tool filters on top, and now your end users have a place to go to find the stuff they need, and where you can kind of pull the best parts from the best reports across tools and put them into the most useful data presentation possible. So that's why we like Digital Hive here at the Super Data Brothers Show, and we thank them again for being a generous sponsor. All right, Eric, any last words for the people?
No. I think that about covers it. So,
all right.
Well, I think this was a good show. Learned some interesting stuff about DBT and the future it's going towards. Who knows? Maybe we'll implement it at state at some point. Who knows?
I mean, I think it's really DBT has a really exciting future, and I'm really looking forward.
If the features
to
work as described, and I can actually have data, like good data lineage and a single semantic layer that supports all the BI tools, that'd make things a lot easier on my end. So
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an awesome. It's a really good tool. If you don't know anything about it, if you haven't checked it out, right? If you're part of that enterprise half of our audience who maybe isn't familiar with DBT yet, check it out. It's awesome. So cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, C-Man, for being here. Always good to see you. And until next time, I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.